In 1927, the world's most elite minds gathered in Brussels for the Solvay conference. It was an invitation-only summit for the pioneers of modern physics, dominated by towering historical figures like Max Planck and Albert Einstein. But if you scan the front row of that famous group photograph, you hit an anomaly. Surrounded entirely by men in dark suits sits exactly one person who looks completely different. This gold medal is the Nobel Prize, the highest honor in academia. Every man in that photograph would be thrilled to win it once. The woman sitting quietly in the center had already won it twice, in two entirely different scientific fields, a distinction shared by no one else in that photograph. At the time, higher education was an aggressively closed loop. Universities routinely barred female students, and laboratories simply refused to hire them. Science was a strict, highly protected boys' club. Curious, how did a woman born into a city that banned her from university produce evidence so undeniable that this exclusionary institution had no choice but to give her a seat at the center of their table? Her path to that table started in Warsaw, a city under the suffocating control of the Russian Empire. Russian authorities were actively trying to erase Polish identity, heavily policing what could be taught in local schools. By the time Maria Skłodowska was 10 years old, she had watched her mother and oldest sister die from infectious diseases. Her father, a math and physics teacher, was fired by his Russian supervisors for his Polish patriotism, throwing the surviving family into sudden poverty. Even with a brilliant mind and a flawless memory, Maria hit a legal wall. The Russian-controlled University of Warsaw strictly prohibited women from enrolling. To continue learning, she joined the Flying University, an illegal, underground network of night classes held in hidden locations to evade the Russian police. To get a legitimate degree, she had to leave the empire. She made a pact with her older sister. Maria would work as a governess to pay for her sister's medical schooling in Paris, and later the sister would return the favor. After 4 years of supervising children by day and studying physics by night, Maria finally boarded a train heading west. Her arrival in France meant she could finally use the name Marie. She had navigated secret night classes and years of domestic labor just to reach the starting line of a legitimate university education. This is the Sorbonne in Paris, one of the oldest universities in Europe. When Marie walked through its doors in 1892, she was one of only 210 women among 9,000 male students. Realizing her math and science background lagged behind her French peers, she spent her nights in a tiny attic room studying relentlessly, eventually graduating first in her physics class. Soon after, she met an introverted physicist studying crystals and magnetism named Pierre Curie, who matched her intense focus on research. Around this time, a French scientist named Henri Becquerel noticed that uranium emitted a strange energy that could darken photographic plates. Because the rock didn't glow or emit heat, most researchers dismissed it as a curious but unimportant chemical trick. Marie decided to test the uranium herself. She discovered that the energy output remained constant whether the rock was solid, powdered, or wet. She proposed a radical hypothesis. This energy wasn't the result of molecules interacting with each other. It was shooting out from inside the uranium atom itself. For the 19th century, physicists treated the atom as a solid block of matter. Marie's data proved the atom had a dynamic, unstable structure that could physically break apart and throw off pieces of itself. She realized that certain uranium ores gave off far more of this energy than pure uranium alone. Working out of an abandoned, leaky shed, she and Pierre spent 3 years manually boiling down and purifying tons of dirt to extract tiny pinches of 2 completely new elements, polonium and radium. She coined a new word for this atomic decay, radioactivity. By isolating these elements, she proved that the atom was not the immutable building block science had assumed it was for centuries. Even with hard data, the elite tried to shut her out. When the 1903 Nobel Prize Committee drafted their nominations for the discovery of radioactivity, they entirely omitted Marie, planning to award it only to Pierre and Becquerel. They only backed down when Pierre wrote a letter refusing to accept the prize unless his wife was equally recognized. They won, securing financial stability and global fame. Then, 3 years later, Pierre was walking home in a heavy Parisian rainstorm. He slipped on the wet cobblestones and fell directly into the path of a 6-ton horse-drawn carriage. He was killed instantly. Devastated, Marie refused a government pension. Instead, she absorbed her grief by taking over Pierre's exact teaching position, stepping up to the podium as the very first female professor in the history of the Sorbonne. A few years later, she found herself at the center of a massive public scandal. After developing a romantic relationship with a separated colleague, the conservative French press weaponized the affair, launching brutal attacks against her. They labeled her a foreign homewrecker, baselessly accused her of being secretly Jewish to stoke anti-Semitism, and incited angry mobs to surround her home. Right in the middle of this public vitriol, she was awarded the 1911 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Despite warnings from the committee to stay hidden, she packed her bags, traveled to Sweden, and accepted the award, proving her resilience against intense public prejudice. When World War I erupted in 1914, the German army rapidly advanced toward Paris. Marie immediately suspended her theoretical research and pivoted her entire focus to frontline battlefield medicine. Doctors needed X-rays to locate bullets and shrapnel, but the bulky machines were stuck in city hospitals. Look at the retrofitted body of this truck. When the French military refused to fund her idea, Marie secured private donations to install X-ray machines into civilian cars, powering the equipment directly from the vehicle's engine. She learned human anatomy, mastered auto mechanics, and drove these mobile units, nicknamed the Little Curies, straight to the front lines. Working alongside her 17-year-old daughter, Irene, she personally X-rayed thousands of soldiers, saving countless men from amputations. This photograph captures a weary Marie Curie, back in her laboratory. What she didn't know was that the elements she had discovered and the thousands of X-rays she administered during the war were actively destroying her body. Decades of unprotected exposure to intense radiation had severely damaged her bone marrow. She died from aplastic anemia in 1934. After decades of research and frontline service, her final legacy was a body irrevocably changed by the very elements she discovered. Her notebooks, her clothes, and even her physical remains absorbed so much radiation that today, a century later, they must be stored in lead-lined boxes to protect the public. This is the Pantheon in Paris, the final resting place for the greatest heroes of France. In 1995, the French government finally recognized the full weight of her incredible contributions, moving her heavy lead-sealed coffin inside. She became the first woman entombed there entirely on her own merits. Marie Curie's seat among the men of the Solvay conference wasn't a gift. It was the result of the rigorous evidence she produced, often at her own expense, driven by her conviction that nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood.